So we want to go from here to talk a bit about what came after, and the question was asked, how did we go from this point where the British have now defeated these Afrikaners and taken the state away from them, and to a point where the NP was able to take over and lead the country into the height of apartheid. So that's where we're going now. So I'm going to talk about this period between 1902 to 1910. So the war ended in 1902, and in 1910 the country saw the formation of the Union of South Africa, which took those four different areas: the Transvaal, Orange Free State, the Cape Colony, what was the other one? Oh, and Natal, and to have them joined into one republic, the Union of South Africa. So, in this reconstruction period, I mean, and the thing that we're most interested here in is back to this thing of the labour problem. And we saw that in this reconstruction period, the elements of a solution to this problem were being developed by the state. So just a reminder, the labour problem was one, to try and end competition for labour between the firms, because it would increase the price, and secondly, this thing of the independence of African societies from wage labour. We talked about why would you go to the mines if you didn't have to, and the point was raised about force. So we're going to talk about. So the kind of basis of the Union of South Africa was an agreement between the British Empire and two of the major Boer generals, Jan Smuts and Louis Botha, to form a joint government and to hold elections. And this joint party that they put together, called the South African Party, won the election in 1910, and they controlled the state. Obviously, the firms before this stage, after this, before the whole war and all this process, it was clear to the firms that this competition between them was a bad thing, right? And was driving the price up. But they didn't have the strong backing of the state who could provide a means of uniting the different companies in a strong enough way. So what you'd find is that they had this Chamber of Mines since 1887, just after the discovery of gold. But you'd find that companies would make an agreement about a certain price to pay labor, but then companies would break that agreement and secretly pay their workers more and cheat the other companies, and then other companies would find out, and you'd be back at square one, where the companies are just competing outright for workers, and the company would go 5 Rand, 5.50, 6 Rand, 6.50, cost would rise. Right? So how this post-war war state assisted was to develop a monopsony in the form of recruitment agencies. Does anyone know what a monopoly is?
Monopoly?
Yeah. Not a monopsony. Monopsony is different, but we'll start with monopoly. So let's say if there's only one company in South Africa making these books, right? And they're the only people you can get these books from, it gives them a lot of power. Because even if they raise the price by 2 Rand, you can't get the book anywhere else. They might raise it to a point where you just don't buy the book at all.
Like Escort here now.
Yeah, so they're examples of these kind of things. So that's what a monopoly is, when there's only one seller of a certain thing in the economy. And what a monopsony is when there's only one buyer in the economy. There's only one customer. Instead of where before you had these different mines all trying to buy labor and competing with one another, the state formed these recruitment agencies, and the only way that you could get a job in the mines was through one of these recruitment agencies. And they would set the same price, and all the miners at all the mines would be paid the same wage, which killed this competition between the companies, right? The recruitment agencies, and these recruitment agencies had offices everywhere in the country, and in Mozambique, in the surrounding countries. In like a town close to your village, there would be the recruitment agency office, and if you needed a job on the mines to pay your tax or to live because the land you lived on was becoming too crowded to grow things on, you would go to the recruitment agency. They would hire you and they would send you to a mine. You couldn't even choose which mine to apply to. You would apply to the recruitment agency, then they send you where you're needed by the companies. You can see how this would kill that competition. Right? Fix the price. Okay. The second part of the labour problem, this thing of societies being independent from wage labour. To make the majority or a large enough number of black South Africans dependent on the mines, dependent on the farms, that to uproot this entire ways of life that had sustained these societies for however hundreds of years. And as I said, the aim of these interventions was to make black South Africans dependent on wage labour, to feed themselves, to pay their taxes, to stay out of, you don't pay your taxes, you go to jail, to avoid these penalties and live lives, made them dependent on wage labour. I think one of the things you may have been referring to earlier when you made that point about taxes were things like the Glenn Gray Act, poll taxes, hut taxes, which meant that the government would say per one person in your household you have to pay a certain amount of money. And as you said, you can't pay it in cattle, you can't pay it in gold or crops or anything like that. You have to pay it in money. To get money, you have to go to the mines. And as you also brought up, there were black elites as well who were involved in this process. So you found there was one interesting example where a chief, I think it was a Zulu chief, said to the young men in his village, you're going to go to the diamond mines in Kimberley and you're going to work. And the arrangement was that they'd be paid in weapons, so that those young men could take weapons back to their village, and that's what the chief wanted.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. It's an interesting example, I think.